Welcome again to our series. In this lesson, we'll be looking at the question, which Messiah do you have? In the previous lessons, we learned that Jesus is the Son of God, begotten of God in the days of eternity, equal with God in divinity, and is worthy of our worship. We also learned that Jesus was begotten 3 times, meaning the Father gave His Son life or brought Him to life at 3 different occasions: in heaven, in the incarnation, and at the resurrection. With all this in mind, someone might still say that the sonship of Jesus is a metaphor. Yes, the Bible does say He is the Son of God and He is begotten of God, but this is just a metaphor. God is speaking to us humans in a way we can understand. That's what some people would like to say. To this I will say, yes, God is speaking to us in human language, in a simple way, so we can understand. And because this is the case, I can't help but ask, why didn't Jesus tell us what today's theologians teach? If God wanted us to understand that He's a Trinity, why didn't He just simply say so? Why didn't Jesus express that or even hint to that? Furthermore, since God was speaking to us in human language and in a simple way so we can understand, what did He want us to understand from what He said? When God spoke from heaven saying, "This is my beloved Son," what did He want me to understand? When Jesus spoke plainly saying, "I am the Son of God," what did He want us humans to understand? Is it possible that God meant what He said and said what He meant? Is it possible that God used human and simple language because He wanted us to understand what He said? That Jesus is His Son and that God is the Father of His Son? So yes, I would agree that God spoke simple human language, and I would add that God said what He meant and meant what He said. And no, it was not a metaphor. When God said about Jesus, "This is my beloved Son," He meant what He said. And when Jesus said, "I'm the Son of God," He meant what He said as well. We are to believe what God and Jesus said. Their words are our theology. It's as simple as that. Now, with that said, I want us to closely consider Jesus' claim to be the promised Messiah. I believe if we understand His claim, taking into consideration the Jews' reaction to it, we cannot but take Jesus' sonship literally. Allow me to explain myself. The word Messiah simply means to anoint or the anointed one. It is translated in English as the Messiah only 2 times in the Old Testament. It comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach, meaning anointed. The interesting thing is that the same word is used to refer to many people in the Old Testament. The Old Testament says that the priest was Mashiach or anointed. The king was the Lord's Mashiach or anointed. Even Cyrus was the Lord's Mashiach or anointed. So saying Jesus was the Messiah or the Mashiach is good, but not good enough. That was not enough to make Him the promised Mashiach or the promised Messiah. I want you to think of this conversation and the question Jesus asked. Notice what He says here in relation to the promised Messiah, saying, "What think ye of Christ? Whose son is He?" They say unto Him, "The Son of David." Notice what Jesus asked them. What do you believe about the Messiah, the anointed one? He didn't ask them, what do you believe He will look like? Or what do you believe He will do? Or what do you believe will happen to Him? No, He focused their attention to the most important aspect about the Messiah, to the identifying mark about the Messiah. Whose son is He? The Messiah promised in the Old Testament. Who do you believe He is? Will He be another king, another prophet, or another good man? The unique distinction about this promised Messiah is not that He is anointed. There were many anointed people or many Messiahs, Mashiachs in the Old Testament. The unique aspect about this Messiah is His sonship. Whose son is he? That's what Jesus focused on. Of course, they said, he's the son of David. They believed the Messiah will be another anointed man, probably a mighty king like David was, who will conquer the Romans and free them from the rule of the Romans, free Jerusalem. But notice what he told them. He saith unto them, how then does David in spirit call him Lord, saying, the Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou on my right hand till I make thine enemies thy footstool. If David then call him Lord, how is he his son? In other words, Jesus was pointing to them that the promised Messiah will not be your normal man, will not be purely human. King David, under inspiration, said, Jehovah said to my Lord, to Adonai, sit thou on my right hand. This promised Messiah will be seated on the highest throne in the universe. He is not just another king. He's not just another priest or another messenger of the Lord. No, he is divine. He will be seated on the right hand of the throne of God. The key to understanding who the Messiah will be is closely tied with understanding whose son he is. So when the Pharisees said he is the son of David, Jesus told them, no, you're wrong. There is much more to the Messiah's sonship than his sonship to David. However, the first verse in the book of Matthew says, the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. So when the Jews said he is the son of David, Jesus told them, you're wrong. But Matthew, under inspiration, said, Jesus is the son of David. If you read the Gospels, you will find the term son of David used many times in relation to Jesus. So why is it that when Jesus was questioning the Jews in regards to the Messiah's sonship, he was not satisfied with their answer? Notice what Paul says to the Romans. Concerning his son, Jesus Christ our Lord, which was made of the seed of David, according to the flesh, and declared to be the Son of God with power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by the resurrection from the dead. You see, Paul says, as far as the flesh is concerned, he is the son of David. That is Jesus, that is. But as far as his divinity, as far as his holiness is concerned, he is the Son of God, to which his resurrection from the dead testifies. When talking to the Pharisees, Jesus had a specific sonship in mind. If the Messiah is only the son of David, well, he is no different than any of the other messiahs or Mashiachs. Solomon, the king of Israel, was the literal son of David and was anointed as a king. In other words, he was Solomon the Mashiach, meaning the anointed or the Christ. That's what the word Christ means, anointed. If Jesus' Christship or Messiahship is based on his human birth, then he is no different than the other anointed people. But he was the Christ or the anointed based on a different sonship, on a divine sonship. That is why Jesus asked them, what think ye of Christ? Whose son is he? I find the context in which Jesus' question was asked very interesting. In the same day, talking to the same people, Jesus gave two parables that illustrated the answer very clearly. The first parable is the parable of the tenants, and we read in it, but last of all, he sent unto them his son, saying, they will reverence my son. But when the husbandmen saw the son, they said among themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and let us seize on his inheritance. And they caught him and cast him out of the vineyard and slew him. And the second parable is the parable of the wedding feast. And we read in it, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king which made a marriage for his son. Both parables are intended to convey the same message. The message revolves around God sending his son and the world rejecting and killing his son. In this context, he asks them, whose son do you think he, the Messiah, is? If you only think he is the son of David, the son of a human being, then you will miss the point. But if you understand that he is the son of the Most High God, you will get the point. His messiahship and his divinity is intrinsically linked with whose son he is. The followers of Jesus understood this point. Notice, when Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And they said, "Some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He saith unto them, "But whom say ye that I am?" And Simon Peter answered and said, "Thou art the Christ, the anointed, the Mashiach. Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Not only you are the Christ, the anointed one. No, you are the Christ, the Son of God. You are not your normal anointed priest or king or even a prophet. You are the anointed, the Mashiach, Son of God. This is mentioned many times in the Gospels. The people that confessed this statement not only highlighted that Jesus is the Christ or the Messiah, but they specified what they meant. They specified whose son he is. Thou art the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God. The highlight is that he's the Son of God. That is his identifying mark. But even then, what type of son are we talking about? Why did Jesus' sonship annoy the Jews so much? Why did they consider it blasphemy? Think about it this way. The Jews believed themselves to be the sons of God. King Solomon, for example, would have had the right to be called Solomon, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of God. So if Jesus' claim to sonship was a metaphor, if it was spiritual ancestry that Jesus was referring to, like adoption, then he was not claiming anything new. The Jews claimed sonship as much as Jesus did. Yet when Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, they wanted to kill him. Why? Because he used the term and meant it in a different way than they did. Notice what he told them. Jesus said unto them, "If God were your Father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me." Jesus used three different verbs in that verse. Proceeded forth, came from, and sent. He meant something by it. Notice what the commentator John Gill says. And by the way, John Gill is a Trinitarian, but I find his comment very interesting in a lot of his belief. Notice what he says, commenting on the phrase, "For I proceeded forth and came from God." The former of these phrases, meaning proceeded forth, is observed by many learned men to be used by the Septuagint of a proper natural birth, as in Genesis 15:4, and here designs the eternal generation of Christ as the Son of God, being the only begotten of the Father and the Son of the Father in truth and love, and the other is to be understood of his mission from him as mediator. Of course, we do not believe in the eternal generation. This doctrine was invented to harmonize how Jesus could be begotten of the Father in the days of eternity, as the scripture says, and at the same time be co-eternal with the Father, as the Trinity says. We already saw in the previous lessons that Jesus was begotten in the days of eternity, a one-time event, if we can put it this way. It is not an ongoing process like the eternal generation idea proposes. But the point is, Jesus clearly says, "I was born of the Father, I came from him, and he sent me." That is why the Jews did not like hearing him say that. They understood what he meant. They understood that when he claimed to be the Son of God, he was claiming to be born of God in heaven. This meant he's divine. This was very important. This is why they wanted to kill him. Notice, therefore the Jews sought the more to kill him because he not only had broken the Sabbath, but said also that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. When Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, when he said that God was his Father, the Jews clearly understood what he meant. They did not understand it in a metaphorical sense like many Christians would have you believe. They understood it in a literal sense. That is why they wanted to kill him, because they understood him to be making himself divine or equal with God by claiming to be the Son of God. Them wanting to kill him as a result of claiming to be the Son of God proves that they took his claim of sonship to be much more than a metaphor or adoption. They took it literally. They did not understand it in a metaphorical way. That is why when he claimed to be the Son of God, they accused him of blasphemy. They understood what he meant. Notice what Jesus also said in his prayer. For I have given unto them the words which thou gavest me, and they have received them, and have known surely that I came out from thee, and they have believed that thou didst send me. They have known surely that I came out or proceeded forth or was born from God. Think about it. Why was it important for the disciples to be convinced or to know for sure that Jesus came out from God? Because this is the identifying mark of the promised Messiah. Because this is the basis of his divinity. You see, we are looking at it backwards. A 21st century Christian already believe in the Trinity and the divinity of Jesus. They read the scriptures with a preconceived idea that Jesus is divine, that he is God the Son, co-eternal with the Father. So when they read the words about him being the Son of God and begotten of God, they interpret them backwards. They try to interpret them to mean he was not literally begotten because he is God the Son, part of the Trinity. They are approaching the scriptures or the words of Jesus backwards. That is not how you should approach the scriptures, especially the stories in the Gospels. You need to approach them from the apostles' perspective. Before they were chosen, the apostles did not believe Jesus was divine. Jesus' words and teachings were to convince them of his divinity. That is why he chose them and taught them. In light of this, my question is, how did Jesus tell them? How did Jesus convince the disciples that he was divine? Did he say, I am God? Did he say, I'm divine? Or I have the nature of God? Going by what we read in the Bible, we do not find such a claim. How then did Jesus teach the disciples about his divinity? He did that by teaching them and making sure they understand and believe that he is the Son of God, begotten of God, hence having the same nature as his Father, hence he is divine. That was how he taught them that he was divine. He never said, I am God. He never said, I'm divine. He simply taught them that he is the literal Son of God. And when they understood that, when they believed that he is the literal Son of God, they came to believe that he is divine. The disciples and all those who believed their words accepted Jesus as the promised Messiah. Not only that, as the begotten Messiah, as the Son of God. That is why they often said Christ or the Messiah, the Son of the living God. They were identifying who their Messiah is. He's the Son of God. They did not mean you are the Son of God like we are the sons of God by adoption or a metaphor. No, they meant it differently. And that is why John said Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. he understood that Jesus is the Son of God in a different sense than we are the sons of God. So for Jesus to be the true Messiah, he had to be Jesus the anointed Christ or Messiah. He had to be Jesus the anointed Son of David, tells us from the seed of David. And also he had to be Jesus the anointed Son of David and begotten Son of God, born of God, possessing the nature of God. This one, his sonship to God, was the mark of his a true messiahship that identified him as the promised Messiah. The fact that Jesus is the promised Messiah negates the idea that his sonship is a metaphor. Either he is the literal Son of God, possessing the nature of God, or he is not the true Messiah. You can't have it both ways. So which Messiah do you believe in? Which Messiah do you have? The promised Messiah, the literal Son of God, or another Messiah who is not the literal Son of God? That is why it's important to correctly understand the sonship of Jesus. It is important to understand that he was begotten of God in the days of eternity. Hence, he inherited the nature of God. His sonship to God is the mark of his messiahship. When 21st century Christians turn Christ's sonship into a metaphor, they are shooting themselves in the foot, because by denying his sonship, they are taking away his mark of messiahship. If he is not the literal Son of God, then he is not the promised Messiah. You can't have it both ways. Before accepting any teaching into your belief system, you must ask yourself the question, how will this belief impact my other beliefs? So again, which Messiah do you believe in? Which Messiah do you have? The promised Messiah, who is the literal Son of God, or another Messiah who is not the literal Son of God? You can't have it both ways. You either accept his sonship, hence your Jesus, the one you read about in the Bible, is the true Messiah, the promised Messiah, or you refuse his sonship, you reinterpret it as a metaphor or come up with some different twist to it, and you lose the identifying mark of the true Messiah, the promised Messiah, and then you have an imposter in the scriptures. I hope this has been helpful. See you in the next lesson. God bless you.